Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Random House Summer Reads. This is the virtual launch of Random House's Summer Read series, and we're so excited for tonight's conversation on our favorite topic, discovering fantastic books. During this evening's event, we will be utilizing the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you have a question, please feel free to ask it here, and Maurice might just pull the question into the conversation. Please connect with other readers and guests using the chat function. We'd love to hear your thoughts, what you're reading, and how you're taking care of yourself during this difficult time. We just ask that everyone please stay respectful in the chat. Random House will also be providing the link to each of our panelists' books that are currently for sale in the chat. This event will be posted on YouTube, and we will send that link out to all guests in case you would like to rewatch or share with your friends and family. I am honored to introduce our moderator for this evening, Maurice Kreisman. Maurice is the host of the Maurice Review, a literary podcast. She's a writer and critic whose work has appeared in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Atlantic, Vanity Fair, the New Republic, and more. And now, may I present Maurice Kreisman and Random House's Summer Reads.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's so wonderful to be here, and I'm so honored to introduce this panel of incredible fiction writers. They run the gamut, but they are all quality. So let's get this going. I will introduce them one by one, and then they can show their faces like a big surprise. Afiya Atakura was born in the United Kingdom and raised in New Jersey, where she now lives. She graduated from NYU and has an MFA from Columbia University, where she was the recipient of the Dialba Fellowship. Her fiction has been nominated for a Pushcart Prize, and she was a finalist for the Hurston Wright Award for College Writers. Welcome, Afiya. Ah, there she is. Next up, we have Linda Holmes. Linda is a pop culture correspondent for NPR and the host of the podcast Pop Culture Happy Hour, which has held sold-out live shows in New York, LA, DC, and elsewhere. She appears regularly on NPR's radio shows, including Morning Edition, All Things Considered, and Weekend Edition. Before NPR, she wrote for New York Magazine Online and for TV Guide, as well as for the influential website Television Without Pity. In her free time, she watches far too many romantic comedies, bakes bread, watches her nephew get taller, and recently knitted her first hat. Evie Drake Starts Over is her first novel. Hi, Linda. We'll have to talk about hats later.
For sure.
Next up is Anne Napolitano. Anne is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Dear Edward, a Today Show read with Jenna book club pick, as well as the acclaimed novels A Good Hard Look and Within Arm's Reach. She is also associate editor of One Story Literary Magazine. She has an MFA from New York University and has taught fiction writing for Brooklyn College, NYU, and Gotham Writers Workshop. She lives in Brooklyn with her husband and 2 children. Welcome, Anne. Yay! Joining us from tomorrow, we have Shibangi Swarup, who is in Mumbai, and it's early in the morning. She is a writer and educator. Latitudes of Longing, her first debut novel, was a bestseller soon after its release in India. It won the Tata Literature Live Award for debut fiction, was shortlisted for the JCB Prize for Indian Literature, and longlisted for the International Dublin Literary Award 2020 and the DSC Prize for South Asian Literature. She was awarded the Charles Pick Fellowship for Creative Writing at the University of East Anglia and has also won awards for gender sensitivity in feature writing. Welcome, Shibangi. Here she is.
Yeah,
good morning.
Hello. Good morning.
Next up, Maurice Carlos Ruffin has been a recipient of an Iowa Review Award in fiction and a winner of the William Faulkner William Wisdom Creative Writing Competition for Novel in Progress. His work has appeared in VQR, AGNI, the Kenyon Review, the Massachusetts Review, and Unfathomable City, a New Orleans atlas. A native of New Orleans, Ruffin is a graduate of the University of New Orleans Creative Writing Workshop and a member of the Podunk Writers Alliance. Maurice.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Yeah.
And last but not least, we have Curtis Sittenfeld. She's the New York Times bestselling author of the novels Prep, The Man of My Dreams, American Wife, Sisterland, Eligible, and Rodham, which have been translated into 30 languages. Her story collection, You Think It, I'll Say It, was a Reese Witherspoon book club pick. She is the 2020 guest editor for the Best American Short Stories. Her work has been published in The New Yorker, The New York Times, Esquire, The Atlantic, Time, and New York Magazine's The Cut, and has been broadcast on public radio's This American Life. A native of Cincinnati, she currently lives with her family in Minneapolis. Curtis. Hello. Hello, everyone. It seems like we're doing good so far. I was hoping that we could start by really quickly just describing your books, telling us what it's all about. Afiya, if you wouldn't mind going first. It's hard to moderate this area without looking down a row of people. But we can do it.
We'll do it. We'll get it. We'll get it right. So hi, I'm Afiya Atakura. Conjure Women is my debut novel. It tells the story of Rue, who is a young midwife and healer in an isolated town of recently freed slaves. The narrative is told through a tight braid of the years just after the Civil War and just prior. And in the story, Rue is sort of faced with three challenges: the birth of a mysterious black-eyed child, the arrival of a charismatic preacher, and a mysterious sickness that is sweeping through the town and creating suspicion against Rue and fears of witchcraft.
Excellent. Linda?
Evie Drake Starts Over is what you will commonly find treated as women's fiction, whatever that means. It is a love story and a sort of, a starting over story about a young widow who is struggling with kind of the public narrative of her marriage prior to the death of her husband. And a washed up baseball player moves into the apartment that's attached to her house. He has recently been kind of driven out of baseball as he lost the ability to pitch very abruptly. And they sort of both have these epic challenges to deal with. And she's kind of trying to, they're both trying to kind of put life back together. And that's basically what the book is.
Anne?
So my name's Anne Napolitano. Dear Edward is about a 12-year-old boy named Edward who's the sole survivor of a plane crash. And the book starts with Edward and his brother and his parents boarding a flight in Newark, New Jersey. The flight is bound for LAX in Los Angeles. And you get to know them and a few other people on the flight. The second chapter starts later that day. The flight has crashed and Edward is woken up in the hospital. And for the rest of the book, you follow the arc of the flight and also what happens to Edward and how he's able to move forward after losing his family and being the only one to survive. It's not as depressing as that sounds.
Shibangi.
Hi, I'm Shibangi, and I wrote a book called Latitudes of Longing, which has been termed as ecological fiction, fairy tales, supernatural, all sorts of things. So I don't really know what it's about, but all the stories are situated on a geologically active fault line that passes through the Indian subcontinent. So you go through the Himalayas, Burma, Nepal, and the tropical islands in the Andaman Sea, because I am as interested in the story of the planet and evolution of life as the characters in the book.
Maurice.
Yes, so my book is We Cast a Shadow, and it deals with the problem of race 50 years in the future. We follow a family. The main character is an unnamed Black lawyer in a southern city that looks and feels and smells like New Orleans, Louisiana, which is where I'm from. His wife is white, a mixed race son named Nigel, and Nigel can actually pass for white. And in this future where race has gotten a lot more tense, the dad decides to try to raise money so that Nigel can undergo a procedure to look less Black. And one of the sort of twists that the dad is dealing with is that Nigel has a birthmark on his face that's very dark and brown. It's getting bigger and darker with time. And so the dad is feeling more pressed to get this procedure done for his son.
Thanks. And Curtis.
I'm gonna do what Maurice did.
Yeah.
My novel is called Rodham, and so in real life, in the early 70s, Bill Clinton proposed to Hillary Rodham twice, and she said no, and then he proposed a third time, and she said yes. And I have written a novel imagining if she had said no the third time also and sort of gone her own way in life, and what happens over the next several decades.
Thanks. This question is for all of you. Tell me about the process of making and editing your elevator pitch. I just asked you to speak about your novel for a minute and you all had such snappy answers.
The elevator pitch is my least favorite. I feel like it's hard to distill when you're a writer. You're trying to get all these different stories into these, into each sentence, and so to have to narrow it down into one cute little clip is hard. It's an exercise in restraint.
Yeah, it's a kind of the difference between like, what do you think your book is versus what do other people think your book is versus what's going to get people to pick up and read your book. There are people who, if you describe a book, for example, in the case of mine, one of the reasons why I often call it a love story is that if you say that it contains a romance, people will not pick it up, who actually will find that if they pick it up, they will like it. So it's sort of a balance between, you always want to be true to what you do, and I would never want to kind of encourage that kind of negative preconception of romance writing, but at the same time, I do actually think that I do actually think it contains some pleasures for people who don't traditionally think of themselves as writing romance. So it's tricky because you want to be honest about what the book is, but you also want to encourage people to give it a chance, and sometimes that does require a little bit of choices of words.
I think that's where editors and publicists are helpful too, because I really have no idea what my book is about when I finish it, like zero, and they tell me, oh, that's so interesting.
And still with us?
Oh,
yeah, I think, and I would add to that too. I think like of all the things that I was very opinionated about with the book, I was not particularly opinionated about either title or cover. And that's because I see those as primarily decisions meant to get people to buy the book. And that's not what my expertise is. So.
Oh my God, yes. I feel like the people that I work with at Random House must love you so much. Must wish that those words would come out of my mouth.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I feel I've I have so much affection and appreciation for everyone I work with at Random House, which I say even when I'm not doing Random House events. But I feel like I almost think that for me, covers and titles have almost been like the biggest sticking points, or like there's been the most back and forth or sort of kind of like going back to the drawing board multiple times.
Yeah, to Linda's point about the elevator pitch, it's true that some topics people treat like it's raw cauliflower, like romance and also race. So here's a book about race, people kind of go, oh, not right now. There's moments like this, obviously, where people are reading a lot more books about quote unquote race. But I knew that when I was making my elevator pitch, and it took me a few years to write the book, and I couldn't get that concise 30-second pitch down until finally one day I was at an event and I met an agent, and I said it right for the very first time. It was like Grasshopper, my son, you finally done it correctly. Maybe you're actually finished with the book. And I think I was correct. Me and the agent signed up, we sold the book, and
oh, wow.
We just sort of forefronted the idea that, of course, it's about race, but really it's about a father-son relationship and about a family. And that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Well, I'm lucky to come from a land where we don't have elevator pitches. So,
So lucky.
I can just, ramble on and hope someone gets what the novel is about. And I think I can expect people to read a manuscript. So, if I had to, so that's the cover of my novel. And I would like to say that if any of you have experienced solitude in nature, this kind of very wholesome solitude, which is the opposite of the loneliness that one feels maybe in urban places like railway stations late at night. If you have felt solitude in nature, then this book is an attempt to recreate that. I wouldn't. I'll save some readers the trouble. If you're looking for a fast-paced whodunit, then this is not for you. Yes.
That's so great. And so while we're on the topic of your editors at Random House, do you want to talk about, and this is for anyone, what the editing process was like? How many drafts did you turn in and get feedback on? How long did it take you? All of that nitty gritty, unglamorous work. Tell me about that.
Oh, Lord, I couldn't stand my editors. No, I'm just kidding. My editors were wonderful. I had Vickery Matsui and Nicole Counts, as well as Chris Jackson. And I just felt like I was in the best hands possible. I thought I turned in a good book, maybe an 80 out of 100. But they got up to like a 95 or so, maybe, I think. And there was just so much care. I think that a good editorial author relationship is like a good marriage, a good romantic relationship. And I felt like they understood my personality type. I'm a recovering lawyer. Like me sort of very direct. Oh yeah, just like Linda over here as well. So I think when they sort of figured that out, if they would like make suggestions, I would go, no, this is not going to happen. I have my own point of view, and I would sort of get calm and I would go, no, they're right. They have a point of view that's very helpful. So I'd make corrections, and there's maybe one big draft we went over together as a group, and I'm just very proud of what came out. I look at it now, I think, thank goodness I met these people because they did a great job.
Yeah, I've talked about the fact that I was not particularly I had training in a bunch of other things, and I had done a ton of other kinds of writing, criticism and commentary and things, but not really fiction as much. And so my attitude was I had a lot of confidence in my ability to write a sentence, and I had a lot of confidence in the story that I wanted to tell, but there were also a lot of structural things that, because I hadn't kind of studied and trained and done those things, I did need help with kind of mechanics of novels. So I worked with Sarah Weiss at Ballantine, who just was incredibly helpful about, she's so good about saying this work's just not working for me. And then I would try it again and she would say, still not really working. And then if it wasn't working, it wasn't working. Eventually I would just decide. She would never really have to say look, we're cutting it. She would basically say if you can't make this work better, I think we should cut it. And then eventually I would get to the point where I would just give up. But I think, the work that I did with Sarah, in addition to with also Sarah Burns, my agent, was super important, changed the book a lot. There's a prologue to the book that is completely from editing with my editor and agent, and totally changes the shape of the book in a lot of ways. And in terms of numbers of drafts, I think I did, I handed in a draft, then I handed in a draft where I added a lot, and then we cut a lot. And so it kind of went it got bigger, and that got smaller again. And that's kind of where it ended up. And so I think we did three maybe major drafts, maybe 4.
I feel like, so I had the idea for Radham in March 2017, and I think extremely optimistically, I thought that maybe I could turn it in December 2017. And just to jump ahead, I would say I turned it in November 2019, but I made it as painful as possible for everyone by saying well, I can't turn it in December, but I think I can turn it in March. And then I would say, well, I don't think I can turn it in March, but I think I can turn it in June. And so my editor is Jennifer Hershey at Random House. And I think, I mean, ultimately, when I finally did finish it, she gave me incredibly helpful feedback. But I think when I look back, and it does feel in some ways so recent that I think that I still, you know, like almost like I'll have more perspective on this 5 years from now. But I think that this is, for me, this was the most kind of ambitious and complicated book that I've written, and it's my 7th book. And I think that in many cases, and she had seen almost none of it, and so some of it was her, and it has a kind of strange premise. And so, but she would like almost like when I apologetically said like, and I'm so sorry, and she would kind of say like, I know you're working hard, you know, just like turn it in as soon as you can, and sort of say how excited she was. And I think sometimes, I think this is maybe the 4th book of mine that Jennifer has edited. I think just like, I mean, it sounds very like trivial or something, but it's like a very significant thing to just feel like someone believes in you and like knows you're trying really hard, even though they're seeing this sort of like messy version of you. And you know, like believes that you can pull it off. Like it's nice to you know, think that other people feel that way. So thank you, Jennifer, if whether you're watching this or not. But and then ultimately, I'll just like try to wrap this up quickly. But I think sometimes, you know, Jennifer will write me like 10 or 15 page typed letters giving feedback that are essentially in very diplomatic terms saying like, you should change this stuff, or you should think about changing this, or reimagine. And I think often on first read, I'll think, no, I shouldn't. I disagree with almost everything. And then like a few days pass and I think, oh, like I think I could do this thing, which does address, you know, what she's pointing out. And so I feel very grateful also, because I feel that I think the book is much better from that first draft I turned in to when I turned in the revision. And I think that she kind of challenged me to sort of figure out what to do.
I love being edited. It's like the best thing ever, because all I want is for it to be better. And I'm super slow as a writer. It took me 8 years to write Dear Edward. And I guess I went through 4 drafts. I worked with Whitney Frick and Susan Campbell, and they were amazing. And it was actually a very joyous experience, because I just felt like they would be like, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. But I was like, oh, good, because, you know, you're showing me exactly where, because I've been with it for so long that I couldn't see it anymore. So it was a really wonderful experience. I'm very grateful for
it. Yeah, I got to shout out my editor, Kate Medina. And I love that Curtis used the word messy, because I feel like it's a very messy process. And I always say, it was like, so my book's about childbirth, right? And my editor is like my doula. She's like, okay, keep pushing, right? And I'm like, no, there's no more. It's not coming out. And she's like, one more push. You know, and finally we got the book baby out there. So I feel like it's that person just coaching you and telling you to keep going.
I took 7 years to write the book, and it's 10 years since I wrote the first line. And I had a lot of rejections in the way. And initially my editors were my sister, my mother, my partner, and anyone who'd be willing to read, let's be honest out here. So when I finally found an editor in India with HarperCollins, and later in the US with Nicole Counts and Victory Matsui, I was so excited that I think I always delivered drafts a little before the deadline. I was so enthusiastic that, I mean, this was the highlight of my life. So I guess, you know, all my editors, so I have worked with 3 editors internationally, India, UK, and US. All of them have helped me amplify the vision of the novel, and like you said, it's a book baby. So they've also helped me retain the vision and the most beautiful parts of the novel, rather than edit stuff out. I'm very lucky to have found people who help me retain the vision and be true to it, and not, you know, invade their own personalities onto it.
That's great. And just a reminder to the audience and to the authors that I'll be taking questions from the audience. So please submit them. I'm going to ask one of those right now to all the authors. Are there literary and cultural sources that you draw inspiration from at this current critical moment? Someone can go first. Come on.
I think for me, it's spiritual sources more than literary or cultural, but by spiritual sources, maybe cultural and literary in another world, like the epics or something. I mean, how can you remain sane in this point without thinking about life and death and the meaning of it all? So if I can be honest, I had just delivered a child. My child has spent more time in this curfew than in the outside world. And it's really put me in a deeply spiritual spot where either I can nosedive into depression or I can maybe come out a stronger person. So I don't believe in God, but I don't know what forces are behind this right now. So I'm looking at spiritual texts.
Yeah, I think, I've definitely struggled quite a lot in the last few months, as I think everybody has. And, I think a lot of us give the caveat that we really mean that, my situation's much easier than lots of people's. I'm still, so far, knock wood, I still have a job. I'm able to work at home. I've been incredibly lucky in that regard. But it's definitely been a very, very difficult time for me. And I find that what I've done is I've become just very non-judgmental about my own desire to watch and read things. Fiction in some ways has been really hard for me to read. I don't know if it's because it's too intense or because it's too personal or something like that. I've gravitated to, one of the things I've gravitated to is kind of like idiosyncratic documentaries about like just interesting people and the stuff that they do, some of which are sort of like eat the rich documentaries, but a lot of which are just like interesting people out in the world. And maybe it's because I miss like meeting interesting people out in the world, running into them. But I'm just very like, if I get to a particular time and I just want to watch like a game show on Netflix, shout out to Floor is Lava, then that's what I will do. And I've tried to be easy on myself about that.
I'll answer this. Obviously, like this is a moment where so many different things are going on at the same time. And I know a lot of white people have sort of been seeking out like anti-racist book lists, which I mean, I certainly think as a white person, I've learned a lot from nonfiction and sort of like analyses of systemic racism. But I would say, I think that I have learned a lot and just enjoyed fiction by some Black writers, or just like, sort of like for like, you just kind of can have this like intimacy in people's lives in fiction that for me, I don't always get. I mean, sometimes I do get from memoirs, but some of the fiction that I've liked, like there's a book called Real Life by a writer named Brandon Taylor that's about a grad student, I think he's a biology, it's definitely a science, I think it's a biology grad student, and it's unnamed, but it's Madison, Wisconsin, I think. It just sort of like, I would describe it as maybe Virginia Woolfian in terms of like being very granular about like human emotions and attraction, which I'm always very into. There was a story collection called Lot by a writer named Brian Washington that's like all the stories are set in Houston and they're super interesting. Like I first was exposed to his writing when he had this amazing story in the New Yorker. And then I know this was sort of a big bestseller, but the Kylie Reid book, it's called, I think, I'm sure it's like such a fun age. I was like, a fun enough age. No, such a funny, about a Black babysitter and like her white employer. And so I feel like in terms of like, I mean, it's not like, like, you know, Black writers have existed all along. Like, it's not like, but I do think that, and like sometimes I think that like just reading about sort of, I think for white people, reading about Black people, like going about their lives can be, I don't know, can be very rewarding. Like, not every book by a Black person has to be a book about race, in my white person's opinion.
What, maybe making the topic broader, what are you reading right now? What have you liked recently? What do you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, I would say, so the two things are connected for me, the things that I read, my inspiration. Now, I will say that when you're in a time where it's like the worst thing has happened, you feel less crazy, you know, because I have written so much about race in recent years. I mean, I've written about gentrification, you know, New Orleans, and a lot of things are happening out here, police brutality, and then my book is about race, essentially. I found that like there are people who would say, well, why would you write about race specifically? And like just today, somebody posted this strange video on Instagram where there was a young white guy wearing a blackface bodysuit. So his entire body, like not only the face was a Black person's face, but like this sort of latex rubber costume. And time again, I keep seeing things from my book that are appearing in the real world. The dad in my novel is trying to stop his son from experiencing what George Floyd experienced, or what Ahmaud Arbery experienced. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is I take inspiration from a lot of the books that I read that were a combination of love and anger. You know, when Angela Davis or Toni Morrison or Baldwin were writing their books and their novels and memoirs and other books, and there was this sort of feeling of rage, but there's also this feeling of we can be better than this. And so I've taken a lot of inspiration from that. Now, in books that are not about race, you know, I'm a big fan of Virginia Woolf myself, and I try to read books that I describe as immersive and very idiosyncratic. You know, nobody writes like Virginia Woolf. She is so, as Curtis said, granular. You know, so much, like not about plot, it's more about feeling and just sort of being in this space. So I love those kind of books. And I had read Ocean's poetry collection, but I finally got my hands on this. I was actually in Belgium just before the lockdown, back in like late February. And I was at Waterstones, and they had this, the UK version of it. So I've been reading that, and I've also been reading things that were on my bookshelf for years that I hadn't gotten around to. So I finally read Geraldine Brooks's March, which I just love. I was shocked how much I loved it. I finally read Cloud Atlas. I loved that and watched the movie the next day. The movie, to me, was great. It was weird, but it was great. And this is a friend of mine, Brittany Cooper, has a book called Eloquent Rage. And I actually had read it when I met her years ago, but I skimmed it really fast on the plane, so I was going to meet her before. It's like, I want to talk about the book. But now I'm taking my time sort of savoring this sort of feminist critique by this Black woman writer. And I'm just having a good time because I do feel like this is an opportunity for us all to do better. And I'm seeing people try. And that's what you really can ask as an artist, that we can all be better, you know?
Yeah, I think for me, kind of going a little bit back to the earlier question of how do you sort of react to the times that you're in as an artist, I feel like you almost don't want to, right? You want to escape, right? You're an artist, you want to enjoy just making art, but you also have these preoccupations, especially, I think, you know, being a Black person in involving race, it's like, how do you write a character that doesn't have that on their mind when that's what you have on your mind all the time? And for me, my novel being historical, it's almost like, okay, there's a remove, but you're always speaking to the current time. You're always examining who we are in whatever time period we're in. And so I think you kind of turn to books to escape, and then you find yourself right back in it, and you're closer to characters. You get to be in other people's minds in a way that you can't in reality.
Yeah, I definitely want to add to your point there. You know, one thing that I found, there was a question when I was a beginning writer in grad school, and the question about writing, quote unquote, about race. And I recognized, like, if I just walk into a corner store, like to buy some, you know, chips, the question is going to come up at some point, like who is behind the counter? Is there a security guard? Who's walking through the store? You know, who's outside the store? And so that is the idea of race, I think, for people who are, you know, either Black or marginalized in other ways. You know, you could be transgender or queer. So those things come to the forefront. I think that as a society, we're recognizing that anybody who feels in danger is kind of always thinking about those things. And that's probably a good thing, because I think before this moment, it's kind of like, well, it's not always a problem for those people. I think people are saying, no, actually, probably is.
Yeah, and I'm finding that in terms of what I'm reading, I'm engaging with things that are about race and are having this conversation, but are approaching it in sort of new ways. So one thing I'm reading is Francesca Monplaisier's My Mother's House, which is about this sort of haunted house or house that is haunting in a Haitian community in New York. And so it deals with race and immigration and all those things, but it deals with it in this sort of, it comes at it from a different direction. I feel like being able to do that, especially in fiction, it opens up your mind in ways that like just watching the news almost doesn't, almost can't.
I'm paging through the audience questions. There are so many. How about, do you have any routines or rituals for when you practice? Oh, sorry, no. Do you have any routines or rituals you practice for writing? Specific songs, certain time of day, cup of coffee or tea, etc.
I think there's normal life and pandemic life are two different things. It's much harder for me to read and write in the pandemic, if only partly because I have 2 kids and they're here all the time. And so now it's like catch as catch can. But I find everything is more intensified. It feels like all of our emotions and everything that's going on is so heightened in everywhere you turn. And also the solace that I get from writing, and when I can read from reading, also feels intensified. So I'm trying to make sure that I write every day for at least like 10 minutes, but more as I'm working on a new book, but it's more like a mental health initiative than it is trying to, you know, reach a deadline for now.
Yeah, I'm pretty, I've been pretty like pandemic blocked, I guess. I just find it really hard to kind of settle my head down enough to write. I find, and that's really funny because like much of Evie was written during like in I'll just say like late 2016, early 2017. Not the most relaxing time in the universe, but I find that now it's a combination of like, you know, just like struggling with the situation, but then also trying to figure out like, what do I want to say? Like, what do I want to say that I think is worth saying and thinking about and relevant? And so it's definitely very difficult. I do find that I happen to be one of those people who does not like to have music playing. I write better with silence. I write all over the place. I take a laptop, I write in the living room. Sometimes I write in the office, but like where I am now, but a lot of times in the summer, it's too hot, which is why I'm so sweaty. So yeah, I wish I had rituals that were reliable because I would use them.
I used to have a few rituals. Like I had a Lucky pen for a while. Like Lucky, very nice, the thick gel blue pen that I liked so much. Now I lost it and I couldn't write for a while. And I said, Maurice, you can't do this to yourself anymore. So I've been like very anti-ritual. Like I don't write every day. I don't write with a certain pen in a certain spot. I just try and find some space that makes me feel good. Often in regular times, I go to a coffee shop, you know, here in New Orleans. And I like the big, you know, plate glass windows with the sun sort of washing in. And you can't feel much better than that. And certain stories require some music, some don't. And it's just kind of whatever works, I think, for me personally.
I need a cup of tea. That's yeah. I mean, that's a non-negotiable. Even if it's cold, even if it's been there for like 4 hours, it needs to have some ginger, something good. And like I say, if you have to give me bad news, give it to me with a cup of tea. Give me anything but with a cup of tea. So that's my. It's not a ritual; it's a necessity. Yeah.
How about on this topic, sort of, does writing energize or exhaust you? I guess, like, are you a writing introvert or extrovert?
That's a new one.
Energize in a maybe a problematic way, because I find myself up all night writing, and then it's 6 a.m. and the sun's coming up, and I'm like, oh no, this isn't supposed to be how it is. But no, I think it definitely energizes me too much.
I think,
And I guess, has your energy changed, I guess, since the pandemic too? That seems like mine sure has.
Yes, I've none. It's somewhat true. I mean, I agree. Usually I find writing really energizing. Right now I find it really energizing, but also it takes a lot out of me. It's like sometimes when I used to do like live podcast shows and stuff like that, we would talk about the transfer of energy, and that it's just like a transfer of energy from you to the audience, which is what makes it great for them. But it can like leave you in a great way. It can leave you feeling kind of emptied out. And that sometimes happens when I'm writing. If I'm very emotional about it, I'll wind up feeling kind of like emptied out, but like in a short-term way, whereas in a long-term way, it energizes me and helps me stay kind of connected.
We appreciate the energy transfer, Linda. Thank you for giving my book a shout out on Pop Culture Happy Hour.
I've been banging on about that book. I've been banging on about that book for like a year. That book, I've said this many times, that book knocked me on my ass, and I started talking about that book as soon as I read it. It was part of a very specific push on my part to read more fiction at a time when I realized that I had written but I still didn't have a great fiction reading habit just because of work and jobs and stuff. And that's one of the books that I picked up, and I was like, this book sounds super interesting. And it just made me be like, I got to keep doing this. This reading is great.
It was like in those old movies when like the 1950s rock star hears their song on the radio for the first time, and their friends all around. I was in my kitchen, my wife eating the salad. I'm like, but did she see my name on the radio? Like, she did.
Great.
But
yes.
Writing tends to energize me. I have found that like in that month, the 2 weeks after the lockdown, so mid-March, I didn't want to write at all. I was probably just, depressed, capital D or whatever, depressed. And then I started getting assignments from people. They were like, hey, would you want to write about the moment? And I'm kind of, I can't say no. So like I write some nonfiction. So I did a piece for the New York Times, another piece for other publications. And that actually sort of brought me out of it, sort of expressing my feelings about the moment, the mixture of like sadness and the mixture of like hope, those two things together. And then my writing group, which I love them to death, we usually would meet like once per month. They were like, let's have like a bi-monthly Zoom meeting, and you have to bring something new every single time. So that was also helpful. So it got me back to the flow of things. I'm trying to stay in this space as much as possible. So I love to write.
Maurice, is your writing group under normal circumstances? Is it all people in New Orleans?
No, we started in New Orleans, but we have people all throughout the South, at least 2 people in California, I think somebody in New York, and I think somebody like in Scotland or something now. It's like 40 of us.
So normally, do you meet in person, or is it some people meet in person, or is it always virtual?
Normally, it's mostly in person, and sometimes people actually come in town from out of town just for a meeting, which is crazy, but that actually happens. But usually it's in person. And maybe 1 or 2 will like Skype in or Zoom in or whatever like that. Yeah. There's a lot of us, like the Avengers or something now. Crazy.
Yeah, I feel like so in the time, since I sort of finished my pre-publication stuff, and then my book came out on May 19th, and I actually just today finished my second short story that I've written during that time, where thank you so much for the affirmation. And I feel almost like in both with both of them, I think that for probably 75% of the time, I felt like I was kind of fighting myself. And then at some point, something kind of kicked in where it gave me the thing that's, almost my favorite thing that writing gives me, which is you know, forgetting myself and forgetting the world, and kind of like looking up and almost thinking like, what year is it? What month is it? Who am I? And then, you know, it turns out the answer to most of those questions is like sort of depressing, but you know, like I did feel like, okay, I haven't lost that like magic of writing, because it's, you know, obviously for all of us, in the end, it's something we do partly for other people, or like, you know, I'm lucky to have books published, but it is certainly something that I always since childhood have like done for myself. And I feel like I just feel like I'm more, I don't know, like it's almost like removing myself from myself, and therefore feeling more balanced.
Another question from the audience is, have your plans changed regarding what you'll write next as a result of the pandemic and all that has accompanied it? And I know we sort of talked around it, but I'm wondering if anyone has more to add.
I mean, for sure, at least my plans have changed. I think I realized, so, I mean, the Latitudes of Longing was published before the pandemic, and I was just toying with the next idea. But it keeps coming back to me during this pandemic that I also have my own narrative. I can't keep, you know, I have to live my life between books. And in the first novel, I situated it in places that I had no real connection with. The characters were all people very different from me because I just wanted to explore. I wanted to be outside myself. But I think the next one will be more about me going within myself and acknowledging my own narratives and my own struggles.
I wrote a novel about a mysterious illness, and it came out during a pandemic. So now I feel like I need to be careful about what I write, just in case. So I'll write something nice for y'all.
Can you get us out of this?
I'm working on it.
No pressure.
Write about a nice vaccine discovery.
Yes.
Would be a good plot.
Yeah, I don't know if my ideas changed yet or not. Like my second book is short stories, and that's coming out next year. But so my next idea was going to be this sort of century-spanning, almost Orlando type book, Virginia Woolf, where you follow a character over centuries. But the idea was to tell a story of Black America. And you know, then during the protests, I kept thinking, you could maybe just go ahead and like crank out a nonfiction book about this moment and what's going on, because I have been having this thought in the back of my head about how we keep having these sort of loops of time over and over again, going back to the same problem. Somebody gets shot, there's a protest, yada, yada, yada. And I feel like there has been somewhat of a failure of people to be radical enough, for lack of a better term. There's always this sort of both sides argument. And I want to say that although I respect so many of the leaders of the past who were like, let's just stick with it over time, it's going to get worked out, I want to say we should all be extreme about this. You know, human rights are non-negotiable. But that idea is sort of rattling around. And what I told myself is that if I get mad enough, I'll write that before this other book. But I'm not sure yet. I'm going to start writing in August, I think. And we'll see how angry I am at that point, which direction I go in.
I would read both of those. For the record, I would read both.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, how about, who's your favorite character to write in your book? This brings us a little bit more inside the world of your books.
There's a woman.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, there's a woman on the plane in my book. There's a number of passengers that you learn about and get to know, and one of them is a woman named Florida, and she believes that she's had multiple lives, like sort of Shirley MacLaine style, and she's just like a force of nature, and I am shy and not a force of nature, and it's always like a lot of fun to write characters like that and sort of, you know, show up in their self and their voice. So she was probably the most fun for me.
Yeah, I think it's those grandiose. Oh, sorry. No, I was just gonna say off that, I think it's those grandiose, like bold characters that are always fun to write. So in mine, I have Rue is the midwife in the main storyline, but in the past, her mother was the midwife and healer on the plantation. And so she has this sort of very magical, very curse conjuring sort of presence throughout the book of this sort of mysterious healer woman archetype. And I get to sort of unpick that and see what's behind sort of the performance and the trickster and the sort of larger than life woman, what's at her heart. And so I feel like that was fun for me to pick up. And
I liked writing my baseball player. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Curtis. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
All I have to say is Bill Clinton. That's all I have to say.
Oh.
Go ahead, Linda.
No. The baseball player that I wrote, I think like particularly for a first book, I think I kept pretty close to the books that I like to read and often read. So he's definitely like to me a romantic lead in a book or a story. So to me, he's a very like appealing, like imperfect, I like to think, but like a very appealing person. He also has like a kind of a more plain spoken, like somewhat profane way of talking that is not, I don't usually get to do, particularly at work. So I enjoyed kind of climbing inside that sort of different way of speaking and thinking and stuff like that.
My favorite character to write in my book is a 10-year-old girl named Araminta. I named her after Harriet Tubman. And in my book, the protagonist is a lot like Humbert from Lolita, where he's doing a lot of bad things for what he thinks is the right reason. And she is the only character who like sees him immediately and knows this guy's up to no good. And she's always right. Like the other adults and everybody just missing what he's doing. She's just like tracking him from page to page to page. And I just love that she was just so on it, because I've known young Black girls exactly like that in real life. And she has a mouth on her tooth, which is also fun to write. So she was a worthy opponent, I think, for him in the book.
Well, I have a lot of ghosts in my novel, and I also have a Yeti, and I think that's been the most fun. It's great fun to write from a ghost's perspective, and just, you can go anywhere you want and do whatever you like. And I do have a Yeti, and it was great fun researching a mythical beast and giving them characteristics and likes and dislikes.
Amazing. How about we're just about winding down now. Tell me about a book you've recently enjoyed or that you're looking forward to reading this summer. I can go first. I just finished The City We Became, and I'm not a huge straight fantasy person, and this blew my mind.
I just read One to Watch, which is by Kate Stayman London, and it is also women's fiction, so to speak, and it is about a plus size fashion blogger who becomes essentially the Bachelorette, and it's real smart about a bunch of different things. It's real smart about media. It's real smart about weight. It's real smart about dating shows. It's a really smart book. I enjoyed a lot.
This is not very helpful, but I just read 3 manuscripts by people I know. And it's just fun to think about these writers who are going to break out within the next year or two. So I'm just so proud of them. And it's just fun to watch writers be born into the world, So.
Wow.
I actually am reading right now. I'm reading a friend's manuscript. It's her second novel, and it's so good. And there is such an exciting feeling of feeling like, oh my God, it's probably a year or like 15 months from now, but look, people are going to be so excited to read this. And it's like, so I don't know. There is something exciting about like knowing some special book exists a little bit before the rest of the world does. But yeah, I'm trying to think in terms of I have a book of a stack of books. I think there's a book called it's very kind of dark sounding, but I think it's called Notes on a Scandal by Lacie Crawford, which is essentially it's a nonfiction account by a woman who went to sort of an elite boarding school in the late 80s, early 90s. And essentially, I think, investigated her own sexual assault almost like as an investigative reporter, and sort of, and I think the school handled it very badly at the time. And someone, I feel like even though I've heard that it's very acclaimed, it's such difficult subject matter that I wasn't sure if I should read it. And someone who didn't know that I had a copy in my house said like, oh my God, have you, it's an incredible, incredible book.
Yes, I was thinking of you when I read it, in fact, Curtis.
Oh, really? Yeah, because of boarding school. Yeah. But those late 80s, early 90s girls.
I've only been able to read books that are like either in a different time or kind of magical in some kind of way during this period. So I read the newest, well, actually they're two huge books, but the newest Philip Pullman book, The Book of Dust, which is the third one in the second trilogy of his Dark Materials, which was like joy to read in the beginning of the pandemic. It was like the first thing I was able to read. And then since then, basically, I've been very slowly reading the new Hilary Mantel book about Cromwell, the Angel in the Light or something, Mirror in the Light, which is amazingly written. And then I'm listening to The Yellow House by Sarah Broom, is that right? Which is wonderful.
New Orleans person. She's wonderful.
Yeah.
That book is fantastic.
So good. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, I've been rereading Isabel Wilkerson's The Warmth of Other Suns for research purposes, actually. But I'm so excited for Cass. I'm looking forward to that as well. And I'm always impressed by like nonfiction writers and how they get all these facts in, but also this beautiful language. So I can't wait to see her next one.
Yeah, the next one's out soon, right?
Soon, yeah, I think maybe August. But yeah, it's going to be brilliant and timely.
I'm looking for recommendations myself. So I'm taking notes of everything you guys are suggesting.
I'll briefly say, based on your book, I think you would like a book by Michael Zapata. It's called The Lost Book of Adana Moreau. I read it as a manuscript and I saw it come out. And it just has this wonderful feeling of being immersed in the spirit and in human nature. And it's a beautiful book. And also Sahar Mustafa has a book called The Beauty of Her Face, Beauty of Your Face, which is also one I read as a manuscript that came out about early this year. And it was just a great book.
Okay. Can you please repeat the first one? Michael Zapata.
Michael Zapata, The Lost Book of Adana Moreau, and The Beauty of Your Face by Sahar Mustafa.
Okay.
Great covers on both of them too. Gorgeous covers. I love great covers.
A writer, an audience member just did you guys see that? It just chimed in to say, like, to everyone, like, I love the beauty of your face. And at first I thought she meant like our
Yes,
like,
Curtis, your face specifically.
Thanks for noticing.
I'm sitting so far back so you can't see.
Your face is totally beautiful.
That too. Well, I have enjoyed the beauty of all of your faces. And we've really used that book title. It's been such a pleasure. Please, if you're in the audience and you enjoyed tonight, buy the books of all of these wonderful, talented authors. They are such joys.
Maris, thank you. I feel like under normal circumstances, I think we would all be like going out for a drink or dinner, and it would be so fun to be able to talk to all of you off camera. But this was such a pleasure to get to interact with all of you. And
rain check. I'm holding you to it, Curtis. Rain check.
I know. I would love to.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.
Truly super fun.
Bye.
Super
Thank
fun.
you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.